Hello fabulous sewist, welcome once again to this beautiful channel. In our tutorial today we want to learn how to go about the making of a ruched skirt. There are different ways of going about the making of a ruched skirt depending on the type of fabric that you are using, whether a lightweight fabric or a fabric that is thick, or whether the fabric will require a base fabric, and if you're also going to be lining your skirt. In this particular tutorial, I shall be showing you how I went about the making of my own ruched skirt, which is the lower part of a dress that I wore for one of the events that we had at LCF. So here is my base fabric satin, which I'd used to cut out the skirt. And what I did was to remove the back length of the bodice, which is 16, to get my gown length 41, and I added just half an inch at the hemline to finish the hemline. So what I have here is from the waistline I came down 8 inches and 10 inches as my upper and lower hip line as usual, and on that region I imputed quarter hip measurement plus 1.5 seam allowance. At the waist I imputed quarter waist measurement plus 2.5 inches for the dart intake and side seam allowance. At the waist, at the center front, I came down 3 inches and I lowered to have my basque waist shape to fuse bodies and skirts together. So here are the markings for the dart intakes and the length, and this is my zipper allowance on the back piece. So the first thing I did was to go ahead to construct all of the darts on the base fabric, the satin, both on the front piece and the back piece, and on the center front I made sure I got my crease line properly ironed out. In the same way, I cut out the lining using my cotton fabric, and I went ahead to construct all of the darts on all the pieces. So the next thing I did was to get the fabric, which I'll be using to create the ruched effect on the base fabric, and this is organza like. I do not really know the name. It has the texture of organza and at the same time soft, but not as soft as your chiffon fabric. So I got 2 yards of this fabric, and what I'm doing now is to fold it diagonally so that the fabric will be unbiased grain, and that will give us a better result for the ruche that we are trying to create. It's just like you are trying to drape. Draping comes out better when your fabric is unbiased grain and not on lengthwise or crosswise grain. So having folded, I went ahead to place the front piece of my base fabric on the fashion fabric, and I measured the actual length, which is 26 inches, and that's what I'm going to be using as a guide to know the excess, the extension that I'm going to be creating lengthwise, and that excess is what we shall be disposing to give us the ruche effect. So this depends on how full you want, but because I'm using 2 yards of fabric, I need to manage. So all I'll do will be to just extend just by the actual length. So I'm just doubling the length of my skirt. So these are another 26 inches that I measured, and I've gone ahead to mark this way. So for the width now, I'll also be marking the outline. So I pulled the base fabric forward a little bit to reduce the width. This is because the fashion fabric is already on bias grain, which tends to pull to stretch, so it shouldn't be the same measurement. But you need to check how elastic your fabric is as a guide, just like I pulled. So this fabric isn't too elastic, so a reduction of just about half an inch is okay. So having done that, I'll begin to do my markings and I begin to cut. So I measured what I'm having at the hemline as a guide to know what I have down. So all I'll do will be to mark this way. So I also had to pull down the base fabric because of the width, the circumference around the hip lines for it to match up. So I'll get the outline out first this way. Then again, I'll pull back the base fabric upwards to get the outline properly for the waistline. Then I'll begin to cut out as marked. So while cutting, I'll still ensure that my reduction is still intact. Again, I'll pull down to get the circumference of the hip intact as well. So I'll begin to cut. If you do not pull down, you might have a shortage around that hip line. So I pull down to create excess upwards at the waistline. So having cut, I do my notchings, and this is what we have for the front piece. So that when we spread open our base fabric and lay over it our fashion fabric, we will have excesses lengthwise, and that is what we shall be disposing to create the ruche skirt. This is what I have left of the organza-like fabric, the fashion fabric, and being unfolded this way, there's a shortage at one end. So it's best for me to cut one after the other, but ensuring that I'm still laying the fabric on the bias grain. So I place over it one of the back pieces, and just like we did the front, first ensuring to extend the length of the fabric. So I go ahead to measure another 26 inches this way, input my marking lengthwise. And remember, because of that shorty, when I'm doing the other piece, they'll be joining. So having gotten the length, for the side as well, I'll need to do the reduction for the width. So I'll also be pulling my base fabric outwards a little bit with half an inch reduction. Then I'll go ahead to impute the outline at the sides, then I'll cut. So having done that, I'll do my notching to indicate the zipper allowance as different from the side seam. So what I'll do will be to lay the remaining fabric well, and using the first cut out to cut the other piece, ensuring it's pairable, right side facing right side or the wrong side facing the wrong side. And it's obvious, you can see there's going to be joining towards the hemline, but that shouldn't be a major cause of concern. By the time we dispose the fullness we are creating, the joining should disappear, it shouldn't be obvious at all. So just make sure you lay your fabric very well and making sure they are both on bias grain. So having ensured that, then I'll go ahead to cut using the first cut out as a guide. And when we approach the point where we need to join, all I'll do will be to simply lift up the first layer, which I'm using as a guide, upward this way, and just cut straight on like so. Then I'll get the other fabric and ensuring that I also lay that on a bias grain. The joining must be on bias, the fabric rather must be on bias at the point at which I am joining it. That's the only way it will relax. So having ensured that, I'll simply lay it over and making sure I made provision for my sewing allowance. So I added just about an inch sewing allowance this way. So having joined this way, I press open the seam, and I'll just want to trim off the seam allowance slightly so that it's not too obvious on the wrong side. On the right side rather. This is what we have on the right side, and you can see by the time we dispose, it should disappear. It's not obvious at all. So we are done cutting both front and back, and the next thing will be to go ahead to the sewing machine and run loose stitches, gather stitches at all of the sides. And for the front, I'll also be running at the center front. So here we are. I had to use a contrasting color for you all to see, to make it visible. And this is the front piece like so. So the next thing we'll need to do will be to get our base fabric, and we shall be disposing all of this fullness that we have created properly. So I'll be starting with the center line, the center front line. So placing the fashion fabric on it, I'm pulling the thread, the loose stitch thread. I'll pull from the hemline upwards this way. I will also be pulling from the waistline downwards this way, all in a bit to evenly distribute the fullness that we have created lengthwise. So having properly done, I'll secure with pins, And as I'm securing with pins, I'm also rearranging and ensuring that both the fashion fabric and the base fabric are lined at the center front, the center line. And that was the reason why I had to create the crease line on the base fabric, so that when I'm pinning, I'll ensure that I'm actually securing the two center lines together. So in the same way, I'll be pulling the loose or stitch at the sides and also be securing the sides down with the with the base fabric. I'll be securing the fashion fabric and the base fabric together at the side seam. So this is how I get to do both the front piece and the back piece, and afterwards we'll be going over to the sewing machine to stitch down. Stitching down now, one might just stitch only at the sides, leaving out the center line. But for me, I choose to stitch down at the center line to making sure that the disposal centralizes. So on the sewing machine now, I'm trying to stitch down at the center line. And as I stitch, I'll rearrange the fullness again to ensure it stays in place, and I'll be removing my pins. So when I'm done with the center line, I'll go ahead to do the sides. And afterwards, I shall be removing all of the threads that I did earlier, the temporary stitching that I did earlier to dispose the fullness, like so. So when you are doing the side, make sure that you try to remove the pin at first. Then you pull the fabric, the fashion fabric slightly. You know it's on buyer's green, so it tends to stretch to pull a bit. So you might have it a bit wider than the base fabric. So just pull slightly and stitch down. So here we are. I'm done stitching down all of the sides, and I went ahead to remove all the contrasting color thread I used earlier. Now I'm trimming down at the sides to remove the excesses, and I also went ahead to stitch again at all of the sides, so all the sides had double sewing. So the next thing we need to do will be to give our project a nice pressing down. So I shall be steaming down to making sure that the fabric lay flat and all the threads are well embedded. So you need to wet like I'm doing, except you are using a steaming iron, or you could use place on it your wet scrap fabric, scrap clothes like this, and making sure you steam down. Make sure you steam. You are going to be doing steaming, pressing down, not ironing at this stage, just pressing down this way. So this is how I get to press down sideways like this, both the front and the back piece, giving us that professional look and feel. As you can see, if it's obvious on your end, you could see that it's looking way different. The part I've pressed is looking way different from the other part I'm yet to steam down. As much as possible, always place a scrap fabric. Do not iron directly. This will prevent heat shine and also storage that touches the heart. So this is what we have. The ruche has been created. Now to complete the skirt, remember I'm making a gown, and here is the lining for the skirt part, which I intend to reduce the length. I'm actually going to be attaching the lining to the hemline to pull it upwards and achieve a neat finishing for my skirt. So I'll lay the lining fabric properly, and I shall be reducing at the hemline, marking out just an inch to reduce at the hemline. So this will make the lining to be shorter in length compared to the main skirt length. So having reduced the length, All I will do now will be to lay the lining right side facing right side of the fashion fabric together this way, and I'll pin down, and I go ahead to stitch using just half an inch at the hemline as my sewing allowance. Then I stitch and pull up, and this will help me to achieve a neat finishing at the hemline this way. And you can see the effect of the reduction at the waistline like so. So pulling up the hemline this way. So in the same way, I'll get to do that of the back piece. So for the back piece, this is what we have, and what I did here is the same thing I shall be doing on the lining. So from the waistline, I'll come down with about 9 inches as my zipper opening. The zipper is extending from the bodice to the skirt, and also I measure another 9 inches which I shall be closing up, while the remaining part will be the slit opening. So I'll go ahead now to attach at the hemline just like we did to the front piece. So here we are, the center back line already pressed open this way, and I shall be using the lining to pull up the hemline, and from the side I'll gain access and finish up the slit at the center back. So this is what the front part of the back looks like. And to finish up my skirt, I shall go ahead to lay the front piece on it, and at the side to taking my body measurements straight on down to the lining. But on the lining, I'll be careful enough not to take as much as I'll be taking on my fashion fabric. If I'm taking like an inch on the fashion fabric, I'll take like about half on the lining. This is to allow for ease of comfort when one wears the skirt. So here we are. My ruched skirt is done. Neatly finished both on the right side and on the wrong side. I adopted the inseam finishing. So this is what the wrong side looks like. So all I need to do now will be to go ahead and fuse the ruched skirt with the upper part, the bodice, which is a corset bodice, and my beautiful dress shall be ready to be rocked. So attaching the ruched skirt with the bodice, I made sure I also attach fashion fabric with fashion fabric, lining with lining to achieve an inseam finishing. So here we are. My dress is ready and looking beautiful, sitting well on me. I do hope you have learned something new on this channel. Kindly do subscribe if you are yet to subscribe. Thank you so much. See you in my next video. Bye.